I'm a college student, currently living in the city. I tend to make most of my student life, while at the same time keeping things calm by often throwing small parties or get-togethers with my friends at my place, since they all have roommates and the like. Today, or better said yesterday, since it's past midnight, was one of those days that I was throwing a little party. I invited around 4 friends for dinner and drinks, and we have spent most of the evening and night talking or looking up bullshit videos on YouTube. Eventually though, starting just after midnight, the party began to end with people slowly leaving until only me and a female friend remained. She always leaves last because she's afraid of walking home alone in the middle of the night, due to a bad experience with a drunk creep who followed her a while back. So every time I invite her over, I walk her home. I enjoy walking, and the entire trip usually lasts little under an hour. 30 minutes to get there, and 30 to get back. Nothing ever really happens. Ghent is a lovely city, 90% of the time, and the trip to her place takes us basically right through the center. This time was different though. After 20 minutes walking, we passed a little park by the waterside, which I refer to as the Dreidel Park, since there is a massive stone dreidel that's the key feature of the park right in the middle of it, to commemorate the Jews that died in World War II. Normally there is nothing here during the night. When the sun's out, some students will park there, but once it gets dark, the place is always completely empty. Well, almost always. This night a man was standing next to the public bathroom by the side of the park. He was dressed in a strange suit with black pants, black vest, black shirt, and white tie. He was tall and had broad shoulders, yet, oddly enough, his arms and legs seemed extremely thin for the aforementioned shoulders. He had brown hair of medium length, and held a chain of keys in his right hand, twirling it around his finger and catching it in his palm again and again. At first I thought he was waiting for a friend to finish his piss and move on. But once we got close enough, I could see the restroom was completely empty. The fact that he was simply standing there, seemingly wasting his time twirling his keys, I found odd enough. But what was truly unnerving about it was his stare. At first I couldn't see his eyes, since it was dark, but I could see he was staring at us. When we were close enough, I could see his unflinching eyes relentlessly gazing at us. His right eye ever so slightly bigger, or better said, more open, than his left. It was subtle, but it gave his gaze that extra nudge on the creepiness factor. When we passed him, I could feel his eyes on my back as we walked away. I didn't think much of it after the initial encounter. I dropped off my friend and retraced my steps back to make my way home. When I made it to the park, however, he was still there. I didn't see him at first, but that sound of him twirling his keys echoed ever so slightly through the street, and I knew that if I passed the restaurant, I could see him standing there. Sure enough, there he was, twirling and watching. Again I passed him, not even acknowledging his existence this time, and simply kept walking, eyes on the road. But again I could feel him watching. After about 20 meters, the sound of his keys suddenly stopped, and out of curiosity I looked over my shoulder to see why he now decided to stop. Considering he had obviously been doing that for a while, he stopped because he began walking in my direction. I didn't think much of it at first since, like I said, the trip took me through the center. But I crossed the street, since I did feel a bit uncomfortable. As I kept walking, I occasionally gazed in the windows of shops or stores to suddenly look at the reflection behind me. and every time I did, he was still there. In truth, I didn't really need confirmation. I could still feel him watching me. I have to cross one of the rivers that run through the city twice on my road. I can't simply keep following him, since the streets don't accommodate for that. The first time on the way back, the road across the bridge actually leads deeper into the center and heads for the center proper. The second time, you're actually leaving the center to the point that 1 more minute walk, you're actually in the outskirts of the city, which is where I live. So when he followed me across the first bridge, I didn't think much of it. But the second time, I was starting to feel the chills. The moment I walked down the street, facing the exit out of the city, I realized he was still following me. I began to quicken the pace in the hopes of losing him. But as I said, he was tall, and every regular step he took was basically 1.5 steps for me. When he noticed I was trying to lose him, he was closing the distance between us, and that's when I heard him hum this accursed tune. High note, lower note, same note, then a short pause, followed by the same 3 notes, much shorter. Then the same 3 notes, like at the beginning, followed by 2 lower notes, with the second one being even lower than the first, at a slower pace than the original 3. He hummed this tune over and over and over again, to the point that I now can't get it out of my head. I decided I shouldn't let this guy know where I lived, so I went down a different street to take him in circles, hoping to eventually lose him. I must have walked in circles for 15 minutes, him constantly behind me before he eventually stopped humming and began giggling. I don't mean laughing, I mean actual schoolgirl-esque giggling, followed by him saying, "I love games." His voice was deep, but not in a creepy way, but more soothing. It was heavy and bass like a blues singer voice, or perhaps jazz at times. It was in fact soothing. It was in fact so soothing, it actually made me uncomfortable. Despite what he said, I think he must have been tired of my games. For now he rapidly approached. He didn't run or jog. He merely walked faster than me, until the last stopped, closing in mere centimeters from my back. I could always feel his eyes, but now I could feel his breath as well. The gusts from his breathing moved the hairs on the back of my head and neck. It was fight or flight at this point, and I chose flight. I ran like a bat out of hell down the street and praised whatever god was listening at the time, but I was a fairly decent sprinter and managed to outrun him to some degree. I guess his fancy shoes don't work well in terms of athletics. I was happy that I could outrun him, but the reality of the matter is that I have close to no endurance when it comes to running, so I was quickly tiring. I ran back towards the city centre, which at that point wasn't far, and the moment I came close, I saw a tram waiting at the station ready to leave. I jumped on it just as the doors were closing behind me, and gazed at the lights on the door button until they went out, which meant the doors were locked. As the tram slowly started to go, I looked up and saw him standing at the station stop, gazing right back at me with a faint smile over his face. Keys in hand, twirling, and while I couldn't hear, I was sure he was humming the damn tune over and over again. I truly hope I never see him again. This situation occurred to me when I was at the naive age of 12 years old. It was around the summertime, so I was just about finishing up my first year in junior high school. My school was pretty far from my home, so every day I had to take the bus to and from school. My aunt and my mother specifically chose the same school for my cousin and I, so that we can go to and from school together. Since we did not have the same schedule, the rule was to wait for each other, depending on who left school first, to take the bus together. We were not allowed to walk home from school. It was quite a distance, so they did not want us to take the risk by walking home. Unfortunately, my cousin didn't always follow that rule. He didn't see the need to take the bus with me every day, and would sometimes go walking home with his friends, who happened to live close to him. Most of my friends lived near our school, so I had no one to walk home with. There were times he did take the bus, though, depending on his mood, I guess. So one day, I head over to the bus stop, waving goodbye to my friends, and waited. This bus was one of the slowest buses ever, and would often get so packed with people that it would skip my stop, so I usually expected to wait a while. On this day, though, the bus stop was surprisingly empty except for maybe one or two other people. It was early summer, so most students would go to the pool or go to the park right after school to hang out. Basically, everyone was walking home except me. Living in a city, New York to be exact, exposes you to weird experiences on almost an everyday basis. I was young, naive, and seriously thought I was not likely to run into anything strange. This is probably why I never really paid much attention to my surroundings. However, after waiting at the bus stop for a few minutes, I felt strange. I felt like I was being watched. New York City on a bright summer day meant there were plenty of people around, but someone was watching. I could not pinpoint who or where, but it was such an unmistakable feeling. I tolerated this for a few minutes and just ignored it. If it was bad, it would have happened already. Yes, that was my stupid logic. From time to time I would check to see if the bus was coming, but it was nowhere in sight. I guess the feeling of being watched was getting to me because I was starting to feel anxious. Right when I thought I was just being stupid, a man approached me. It was like he just appeared beside me. I didn't even feel his presence at all, and jumped in surprise when he asked, "Hey, can you help me?" I never mentioned this, but as a 12-year-old female, I was already around 5'7", tallest in my class. And this guy was around 5'5" or so. He looked to be in his mid-40s and was Hispanic like myself. He looked to be pretty harmless. He didn't look like he was high or drunk. He asked me this question in Spanish, to which I responded, "Sure, how can I help you?" in Spanish as well. Since he didn't look suspicious at all, I relaxed and was eager to help a person in need. He then asked, "How do I get to Avenue B?" I looked at him with, I assume, a very confused expression. We stood near a corner where the street sign was clearly visible. It said, Avenue B. This was obviously a red flag, even for a naive 12-year-old girl. I held back a chuckle, thinking maybe he couldn't see well, and said, "This is Avenue B." Then he looked at me for a moment and gave me one of the most creepiest smiles I've ever seen. It wasn't warm at all, it felt wrong, like he wanted to eat me alive. I instantly felt nervous. Then he said, "You're such a sweet girl for helping me. What's your name?" My heart was racing at this point. "I can't tell you." I responded quickly and checked to see if the bus was coming. I thought if I brushed him off and ignored him, he would take the hint and leave. He was silent for what felt like a few hours. I looked around me, at the floor, everywhere except the area beside me. Eventually I exhaled and checked to see if he left. Nope. He was standing intently beside me with that creepy smile plastered onto his face. "If you come with me, I'll give you a nice gift, he said, still smiling. I never hated my cousin more than I did at this moment. Of all the days he decided to walk home instead of take the bus, it just had to be the day some creep approached me. I knew I couldn't stay at the bus stop. He was persistently asking me questions. He would move his eyes up and down my body slowly. When you're afraid, and basically suck at being social like I was, you would never think to ask for help. I don't know why I felt like I needed to just handle this myself, but I decided to leave this stop and walk to the stop before mine, which is about 4 or 5 blocks away, hoping to get away. I didn't even bother responding to any of his questions, and just casually walked away. I was speed walking and was so grateful for having long legs. I reached the end of the first block and looked back just to be sure. He was right behind me. Don't be shy. I just want to give you something, he said, basically pleading. Nope, I didn't want it. I kept walking, looking through the crowd of students, hoping to spot someone I knew. No luck. So I kept walking until I finally reached the next block. The blocks were short and felt so far apart in that moment. I had 3 left. I looked back again and he was still there, laughing like we were playing some sort of game. This guy was keeping up pace, even though my strides were longer than his. He was so close. I can hear him breathing heavily. He was practically jogging behind me since he had trouble keeping up. This guy was seriously demented. There were no cell phones yet back then when this happened, so it's not like I could call anyone. I didn't want to stop at a payphone to make a call so that he could catch up to me easily. I didn't want to bother asking a stranger for help either. If anything, I was paranoid. What if this thing did the same thing as this creep? I thought. I was an idiot. I was panicking, so at that moment I lacked common sense. Stop walking so fast, he said. Really? I was just about to start running when magically one of my classmates appeared. She was walking with a bunch of her friends. We had a few classes together and hardly spoke to each other at school, but I didn't care. I needed an escape. I walked straight up to her and said, Hey Julie, can I walk with you? I was too excited when I asked her this, and she gave me a look and said, What the hell is wrong with you? But then continued to look at me. I guess the look of panic on my face was so obvious, so she said, Sure, let's go. I am forever grateful to her for reading my face so well. I walked with her quietly for a few blocks past my bus stop, till she had to turn to go home. I thanked her and looked behind me when she left. He didn't follow us. I jogged to the next stop just to be sure, and the bus arrived about a minute later. I never saw him again after that day. I never told my mother anything about it until years later. I should have said something in case he preyed on someone else. I will always regret that. Wherever you are, a creepy bus stop man. Let's not meet again. No, this is from a female's perspective. At the time, I was working in a kind of sketchy area of town. I was getting out of work just before 11 p.m. My home at the time was about 10 minutes away from where I worked, but I had sustained a sports injury earlier in the week and didn't feel like walking. My roommate was gone for the week. I didn't have a car, and nobody else was answering their phones. My workplace was just on the other side of the street from one of the major bus stations in town. I looked at my bus schedules on my phone and realized that I would just have to wait about 10 minutes for a bus. Most of the homeless people that hung around the bus station were nice, but there was a very healthy red light district in this part of town, and a lot of activity involving drug dealers and gangs. I was sitting on the bench waiting for the bus when I was approached by this guy who told me his name was Zeke. I would say that he was probably in his mid-50s to early 60s, was of average height, and was disturbingly skinny. He smelled really bad and had visible track marks, and hardly ever seemed to blink. He kept putting his hand on his crotch, and it kind of bothered me. He was clearly high on something, and this could get really scary if I didn't play my cards right. He started flirting with me, and he probably thought he was Rico Suave in his head. It started off benign enough, with him saying things like, "You have pretty eyes and hair." Things started to get really weird. "What cup size are you? Are you a virgin? I bet your pussy is tight. I bet your titties are really perky." I just acted sexually oblivious or said, "Thanks," whenever he complimented me, whether I meant it or not. This was not my preferred MO, and not what I would have normally done in a situation like this. Based on his fresh-looking track marks and behavior, I knew he was high, and this had a very real possibility of getting out of hand if I were to piss him off by leaving suddenly, or telling him how I really felt about his compliments. I was also tired, and just hoped he would become more interested in something else. I didn't want anything else to come between me and my hot shower at home. I glanced down at my phone and got the notification from my bus tracker app that the bus would be running 5 minutes late. Of course this would happen now. The red flags were definitely telling me to note the fuck out, but it was just moderately annoying more than anything else at this point. And I was tired and really sore. This was where things got particularly creepy. He started touching my face with his grubby hands and telling me how smooth my skin was. Then he asked, "Do you want a child?" I responded with an honest no, as I have never wanted children. He offered to help me with it in case I ever changed my mind. I told him that it wouldn't be necessary, and I finally saw that my bus was only a minute away. This somehow led to him giving me gifts from out of his backpack. The gifts consisted of a worn children's book and a folded towel. I took the gifts home, knowing my boyfriend would be home from work soon, and he had to see the gifts the creepy junkie at the bus station had just gave me. I didn't unwrap the towel until I got home to show my boyfriend, who was walking into the door around the same time. I unfolded the towel, and to my horror, there was what appeared to be a used pair of women's underwear. I don't know why he had them, and I don't want to know. I promptly took everything to the dumpster, and took a very long, very hot shower.